Son cut me off 4 years ago, all because I dated and married his best friend. Now he told me this. I had my son, Daniel, when I was 21, and from that point on, it was just the two of us. His father, John, passed away in an accident when Daniel was barely 2. Losing him was tough, and I found myself going from being a young mom with some support to just being alone. All of a sudden, I had this kid depending on me for everything, and I had no idea what I was doing. But you figure it out, right? You don't really have a choice. So, I did what I had to do. I focused on Daniel, made sure he had everything he needed, and tried my best to keep things normal for him. As the years went by, I had a few relationships here and there, but they never lasted long. It's hard when you're a single mom. People don't always want to deal with the fact that you've got a kid at home, and I wasn't willing to settle for just anyone. Most of the time, I just didn't bother. I'd occasionally meet someone, but I never let it get serious. Daniel was always my first priority. By the time Daniel was in high school, things had kind of settled into a routine. He was quiet, kind of a loner, really. He didn't have a big group of friends like most kids his age. He was smart, though, and kept to himself, which meant I never really had to worry about him getting into trouble. But part of me always wished he'd branch out a little more, make some close friends, you know? I think every parent wants that for their kid. Then, during his senior year, he brought home a friend named Max. That was kind of a surprise to me because, like I said, Daniel wasn't the type to bring people home or even mention friends. Max was different, though. He wasn't one of those loud, obnoxious teenage boys. He was polite, respectful, and always made an effort to talk to me. We'd chat about all kinds of random stuff. Movies, books, even just everyday things like school or work. He seemed like a good influence on Daniel, and I was honestly just relieved that Daniel finally had someone to hang out with. Max started coming over pretty often, especially on weekends. I'd find him sitting on the couch with Daniel, playing video games or watching movies. Sometimes Max would stay for dinner, and we'd all eat together. Those were nice nights. We weren't this big, bustling family or anything, but it felt good to have some life in the house, you know? After a while, Max and I got more comfortable with each other. Nothing weird or anything like that. He was just around a lot, and we'd talk whenever he came over. Eventually, we exchanged numbers, mostly so I could text him if Daniel needed something, or if he was running late. But then, Max started sending me jokes and memes randomly, and I'd respond. It was innocent, and Daniel didn't seem to care, so I didn't think much of it. Looking back, I guess I didn't notice how much Max had become a regular part of our lives. It wasn't anything major, just small moments, like him staying for dinner, talking to me while Daniel was in the other room, and helping out with random stuff around the house. He'd even offer to fix little things, like a broken cabinet or something that needed a quick repair. Max was just there, and it felt normal. It's weird because for so long, it was just me and Daniel. Having someone else around was kind of nice, even if it was just one of Daniel's friends. Max wasn't like the other boys his age. He was mature in a way that made him easy to talk to. We didn't have those awkward silences like you'd expect between a teenager and an adult. Instead, we'd have actual conversations, and it felt good to have that connection with someone. But despite how much Max was around, I always tried to keep my focus on Daniel. He was heading into his final year of high school, and I wanted to make sure he had everything he needed for college. We'd spent years saving up, and I wanted to help him get ready for that next big step in his life. We had our ups and downs like any parent and teenager, but overall, I thought things were good. Then one weekend, Max texted me out of the blue asking if we could meet up for coffee. That was strange because we'd never really hung out outside of the house, and I couldn't figure out why he'd want to meet up without Daniel. My first thought was maybe something happened with Daniel, so I asked Max if everything was okay. He just said it was something important, but nothing to do with Daniel. That made me even more curious, so I agreed to meet him. I remember feeling a little nervous on the way to the coffee shop. I kept wondering what Max could possibly want to talk about that was so important. When I got there, he was already sitting at a table, looking nervous as hell. I hadn't seen him like that before, and it put me on edge. After a bit of small talk, I finally asked him what was going on. He took a deep breath and told me he'd been wanting to say something for a while but didn't know how. Then he just came out with it. He had feelings for me. I was completely blindsided. I mean, Max was 18 at this point, but I'd never thought about him like that. He was Daniel's friend, and that's all I ever saw him as. So, hearing him say that he had feelings for me threw me off. I didn't know what to say at first, and I think he could tell because he immediately started backpedaling, saying he knew it was probably weird and that I didn't have to feel the same way. Part of me wanted to just shut it down right then and there, but the other part of me, well, it had been so long since anyone had shown any real interest in me. Max wasn't just some random guy, he was someone I already trusted. So instead of shutting it down, I told him I was flattered, but I needed time to think about it. I couldn't make a decision without considering how it would affect Daniel. Max understood and said he'd wait for my answer. He didn't pressure me, and that made it harder to just write him off. He was sweet, respectful, and honestly, a part of me was tempted. But I knew this wasn't just about me, it was about Daniel too. So I had to figure out if this was something I could even consider, or if it was just a bad idea from the start. By the time I left the coffee shop, my head was spinning. I had no idea what to do next, but I knew I couldn't avoid the situation forever. After that meeting with Max, my mind was a complete mess. I wasn't sure what to do or even how to feel. I mean, it wasn't like I had guys lining up at my door, you know? But this was different. It was Daniel's friend, and no matter how sweet and respectful Max was, there was this nagging feeling in my gut that this wasn't a good idea. But still, there was another part of me that was curious, maybe even flattered. I hadn't had anyone look at me like that in years. I spent the next few days trying to figure out what to do. I kept thinking about what it would mean for me and Daniel if I went down this path. Would Daniel be furious? Would it mess up their friendship? And even if I decided to give it a chance, was it even worth it? Max was 18, freshly out of high school, and I was, well, his friend's mom. It felt like something out of a bad movie. But then Max texted me again. It wasn't anything big, just a casual, "how's your day" kind of message, like nothing had happened between us. For a while, I thought maybe he had changed his mind or was trying to pretend that whole conversation never happened. But that wasn't it. We kept texting, and slowly the conversations got a little deeper. He'd tell me about stuff going on in his life, about his plans for college, and sometimes we'd even joke around like we used to. And honestly, it felt good. I didn't feel like I was just someone's mom or a woman past her prime. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. I was still cautious, though. I kept telling myself that nothing could happen between us. But then Max asked to meet up again. This time, it wasn't in a crowded coffee shop. He wanted to meet at his place. I don't know why I agreed, but I did. Maybe I was just curious. Maybe I wanted to see if this was something real, or if it was just some teenage crush that would fade away. I told Daniel I was going out with friends, and then I drove over to Max's. When I got there, he was already waiting outside. He looked nervous, but there was something else there too. Something that made me realize he wasn't going to let this go. We sat down in his living room, and before I could even say anything, Max just came right out with it again. He said he couldn't stop thinking about me, that he had feelings for me, and he didn't care about the age difference or the fact that I was his friend's mom. I tried to play it cool, telling him we needed to be careful, that Daniel couldn't know about this. But the more I talked, the more I felt myself getting drawn in. Max was kind, sweet, and he made me feel special in a way I hadn't felt in years. And I guess that's why I did what I did next. We ended up sleeping together that night. It wasn't something I planned, and honestly, part of me regretted it right afterward. But there was another part of me, the part that had been lonely for so long, that didn't. I told myself that it was just going to be a one-time thing, that we could just move on from it and no one would ever have to know. But deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. After that night, Max and I started seeing each other more and more. It became this thing where I'd sneak away to meet him, always making sure Daniel had no idea where I was going. I started telling little lies, like saying I was working late or meeting up with friends just so I could spend time with Max. At first it was thrilling, like we had this secret world that was just ours. But as the weeks went on, things started to change. Max wasn't just some high school kid with a crush anymore. He was becoming something more to me. We'd talk for hours about everything, our pasts, our dreams, things we'd never told anyone else. I found myself falling for him in a way I hadn't expected. He was becoming the highlight of my week. I'd spend all day looking forward to the next time we could meet up, and when we weren't together, we were texting constantly. The weird thing is, I didn't realize how much I was pulling away from Daniel until it was too late. I started missing his soccer games, telling myself I'd catch the next one. I missed family dinners because I was stuck at work, when really I was out with Max. And the worst part, I didn't feel as guilty as I should have. I kept telling myself that Daniel was a teenager, almost an adult, and he didn't need me around as much anymore. But looking back, I know that was just an excuse. I was so wrapped up in Max that I didn't see how much I was neglecting my son. It all hit me on Daniel's birthday. We had plans to go out for a nice dinner, just the two of us, like we always did. But then Max texted me, saying he had something important to tell me. I should have said no. I should have put Daniel first, but I didn't. I told Daniel that work was keeping me late and that we'd have to celebrate another night. The look on his face when I told him, it broke something inside me. But I ignored it, brushed it off, and went to meet Max instead. We had a great night, and Max ended up telling me he was falling for me. I didn't say it back, but I knew I felt the same way. By the time I got home, Daniel was already asleep. I stood outside his room for a long time, thinking about what I had just done. I wanted to go in, apologize, tell him the truth, but I didn't. I told myself it was for the best. The next morning, Daniel didn't say anything about the missed dinner. He didn't ask why I wasn't home. He just went about his day like nothing had happened. But things were different. He was quieter, more distant. I thought maybe he was just stressed about school or college applications, but part of me wondered if he was starting to figure things out. I kept telling myself that he didn't know, that he couldn't know, but the more I thought about it, the more paranoid I got. I knew I had to make a decision. Either I had to end things with Max or come clean to Daniel, but I wasn't ready for either. So I kept lying. I kept sneaking around. And all the while, I kept telling myself it would all work out somehow. But deep down, I knew things couldn't stay the way they were. After that missed birthday dinner, things between me and Daniel got worse. He wasn't just distant, he was starting to feel like a stranger in his own home. He'd come back from school, barely say a word, and lock himself in his room. I knew something was wrong, but I was too scared to confront it. And honestly, I didn't want to admit that it had anything to do with Max. I thought if I just kept everything quiet, things would go back to normal eventually. But that's not how it works, right? Meanwhile, things with Max were getting more serious. I was spending more and more time with him, making up excuses for why I couldn't be home, or why I had to skip another one of Daniel's soccer games. It was like living two completely separate lives. When I was with Max, I felt this rush, like I was alive in a way I hadn't been in years. But when I came home to Daniel, the guilt would start creeping back in. I remember one night, I came home late after meeting Max, and Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table, just staring at his phone. He didn't even look up when I walked in. Normally, I would have asked him about his day, maybe tried to start a conversation, but I didn't. I was too tired from juggling this secret relationship and everything else. So, I just said a quick goodnight and went to my room. That's how things were between us. Quiet, awkward, and filled with tension. It felt like any day now something was going to give, but I kept pushing it down, pretending like I could keep everything together. One weekend, Max texted me, saying he wanted to meet up at his place again. I didn't think twice about it. By then, it had become routine. So, I told Daniel I was going out with friends, the usual excuse, and headed over to Max's. We had a great time, but when I got home that night, something was off. Daniel wasn't in his room. I checked the house, but he was nowhere to be found. I started panicking, thinking maybe something had happened to him. I called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I waited for hours, pacing around the living room, wondering where he could be. Finally, around 2 a.m, he walked through the door. His clothes were a mess and his knuckles were bruised. I asked him where he'd been, and he just looked at me with this blank expression, like he didn't even recognize me. "Out," he said, and headed straight for his room. I tried to stop him, tried to ask him what was going on, but he slammed the door in my face. I stood there for a minute, trying to process what had just happened. Something was seriously wrong, but I didn't know what. And honestly, I wasn't ready to find out. The next morning, I decided to give him some space. I thought maybe he needed time to cool off, and eventually, he'd open up to me. But things only got worse from there. Over the next few weeks, Daniel stopped talking to me completely. He wouldn't even look me in the eye anymore. And I knew, deep down, I knew something had shifted between us. Then one day, everything came crashing down. I was at work when I got a text from Max. "We need to talk. Daniel knows." My heart dropped into my stomach. I felt like I was going to be sick. I didn't know how Daniel had found out, but the thought of him knowing about me and Max terrified me. I left work early and drove home, my hands shaking the entire way. When I got home, Daniel was sitting on the couch, staring at the TV, but I could tell he wasn't really watching it. I stood there in the doorway, not knowing what to say or how to even start the conversation. The air felt thick, like there was this invisible wall between us. Finally, I worked up the nerve to speak. "Daniel, can we talk?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer at first, just sat there, his eyes still glued to the TV. But then, without looking at me, he said, "I already know." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. "Know what?" I asked, even though I already knew exactly what he was talking about. He turned to me then, and the look on his face, it wasn't anger, it was worse. It was disappointment. "You and Max," he said, his voice flat, like he couldn't even be bothered to put emotion behind it. I felt my stomach drop. "Daniel, Don't," he interrupted. "I don't want to hear it." I didn't know what to say. What could I say? I had been lying to him for months, sneaking around with his best friend, and now he knew. The guilt hit me like a truck. I tried to explain, tried to tell him that I didn't mean for it to happen, that it just kind of did, but he wasn't having any of it. "You lied to me," he said, his voice shaking now. "All those times I asked you where you were going, all those times I wanted to spend time with you, and you chose him instead." I couldn't look him in the eye. I had no defense. Everything he was saying was true, and I had no excuse for it. "I don't even know who you are anymore," Daniel said. "You're not the mom I thought you were." Hearing him say that, it broke something inside me. I had always tried to be a good mom, always tried to put Daniel first. But somewhere along the way, I had messed up, big time. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. But it didn't matter. It was too late. The damage was already done. Daniel didn't say anything after that. He just grabbed his keys and left. I didn't try to stop him. I didn't know how. I just stood there, crying, feeling like the worst mother in the world. After he left, I called Max, hoping he could help me figure out what to do. But when I told him what happened, all he could say was, "I'm sorry." He sounded as lost as I felt. For the next few days, Daniel barely came home. When he did, he didn't speak to me, didn't even look at me. It was like I didn't exist to him anymore. And I didn't blame him. I had destroyed everything. One evening, a week after that confrontation, I was in the kitchen when Daniel came home. He didn't say anything as he walked past me, just went straight to his room and started packing. My heart sank as I realized what was happening. He was leaving. I tried to talk to him, tried to tell him that we could work through this, that I was sorry for everything, but he wouldn't listen. "I'm going to stay with Grandpa," he said, not even looking up from his suitcase. "Don't bother calling." And just like that, he was gone. After Daniel left, the house felt empty in a way I'd never experienced before. I had been used to him being quiet, to him keeping to himself. But now, it was like he was really gone, and I couldn't escape the silence. Every time I walked past his room, I had this stupid hope that maybe he'd come back, maybe he'd change his mind and realize we could fix things. But deep down, I knew better. The look on his face when he left, it was like he had made up his mind, and there was nothing I could do to change it. I tried calling him, I tried texting him, I even reached out to his grandfather, but he told me to give Daniel space, to let him come to me when he was ready. But how could I just sit around waiting? The guilt was eating me alive. Every time I replayed the last conversation in my head, it got worse. I kept thinking of all the things I could have said, the ways I could have handled it better, but none of that mattered now. He was gone, and I had no idea when or if he'd come back. Max was supportive through all of this, but even that didn't feel right. He'd come over after work, and we'd sit together, talking about what happened. He kept telling me that Daniel just needed time, that eventually he'd come around. But every time Max said that, I felt this sinking feeling in my stomach. Because what if Daniel didn't come around? What if I had really messed up so badly that there was no fixing this? I wanted to believe Max, I really did. But as the days turned into weeks, and Daniel didn't call, didn't text, didn't even show any sign that he cared I existed, it became harder to hold on to that hope. I tried keeping myself busy. I threw myself into work, into cleaning the house, into anything that would distract me from the fact that my son was gone. But no matter what I did, the silence in the house always brought me back to the same place. One night, about 3 weeks after Daniel left, I got a call from his grandfather. My heart jumped when I saw the number on the screen, thinking maybe Daniel was with him and wanted to talk. But the second I picked up, I knew it wasn't good. "Listen," his grandfather said, "I think it's best if you stop trying to contact Daniel for a while." I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what he meant. "He's angry," he continued, "really angry. He told me everything about you and Max, and, well, I think it's just going to take time." I couldn't speak for a second. I had always been on good terms with Daniel's grandparents, especially after John died. But hearing this, knowing that even they were telling me to back off, it felt like I was losing everything. "I didn't mean for this to happen," I said, my voice shaking. "I never wanted to hurt him." "I know," his grandfather said softly, "but sometimes things don't work out the way we plan. Just give him space. He'll come back when he's ready." I hung up the phone and just sat there in the dark, feeling completely lost. All I wanted was for things to go back to how they used to be. But I knew that was impossible now. I had crossed a line and there was no going back. Over the next few months, I tried to settle into a new normal. Max and I started spending more time together, but it wasn't the same. There was always this weight hanging over us, like the shadow of what had happened with Daniel. Every time we were together, I could feel it. I could tell Max felt it too, even if he didn't say anything. He kept trying to reassure me that things would be okay, but I wasn't so sure anymore. I started to wonder if maybe I had been wrong about everything. Maybe I had rushed into things with Max too quickly. Maybe I should have been more careful, more thoughtful about how it would affect Daniel. But at the same time, I didn't want to regret the relationship I had with Max. He made me happy in a way I hadn't been in years. And wasn't I allowed to be happy too? But no matter how many times I told myself that, the guilt didn't go away. Then one day, I was cleaning up around the house when I found one of Daniel's old notebooks. It was from his senior year, filled with notes for school and doodles he used to do when he was bored. Seeing it was like a punch to the gut. I sat down at the kitchen table and started flipping through it, remembering all the little moments I had with Daniel when he was still here. As I turned the pages, I found a list he had written, probably for some school assignment. It was a list of things he wanted to do after graduation. At the top of the list was go to college, followed by things like get a job, travel, and spend more time with mom. That last one hit me the hardest, because here I was, sitting in an empty house, and the one thing he wanted was to spend time with me, and I had completely blown it. I sat there, staring at that list for what felt like hours. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. How had I missed this? How had I let things get so far that my own son didn't even want to talk to me anymore? After that, I started writing letters to Daniel. I knew he probably wouldn't read them, and even if he did, I didn't expect him to respond. But it was all I could think of to do. I needed to say the things I hadn't said before. I needed to apologize. I needed to explain why I had made the choices I did, even if those choices were wrong. I wrote him every week, pouring out everything I was feeling, everything I wished I could say to him in person. I told him how much I missed him, how much I regretted not being there for him when he needed me. I apologized over and over, even though I knew it wouldn't change anything. I didn't send the letters right away. I wasn't sure if I ever would. But just writing them helped, in a way. It was like I was finally facing what I had done, finally admitting to myself that I had messed up. Max tried to be there for me, but even he could tell I was struggling. I think he felt guilty too, like maybe if he hadn't pursued things with me, none of this would have happened. But we both knew that wasn't true. I had made my choices, and now I had to live with them. The hardest part was not knowing if Daniel would ever come back. Every day I'd check my phone, hoping for a text, a call, anything, but it never came. And each day that passed, it felt like I was drifting further and further away from him. I didn't know how to fix it, and that was the worst part. I had always been able to fix things before, but not this time. This time, I wasn't sure if I'd ever get my son back. As time went on, I started to lose hope that I'd ever hear from Daniel again. Every day I'd wake up thinking, maybe today will be the day he calls or texts or something. But the weeks turned into months, and then years, and still nothing. I tried everything to keep busy, to keep my mind off of it. I threw myself into work, into taking care of the house, and into my relationship with Max. We got married after about a year, and we even had a little girl together. But no matter how hard I tried to move forward, there was always this hole where Daniel used to be. It's like a piece of me was missing, and no matter what I did, I couldn't fill it. I still wrote letters to him, though. I never sent them, but I kept writing. It was the only way I felt connected to him, even if I knew he'd never read them. It helped, in some small way, to get the words out. Then out of nowhere, after 4 years of nothing, I got a text from Daniel. I remember it like it happened yesterday. I was cleaning up after dinner and my phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't think much of it at first, probably just some random notification or spam message. But when I saw Daniel's name pop up on the screen, I froze. I stared at the message for a solid minute, not even sure if I was imagining things. All the text said was, "I'm going to be in town on Friday, can we meet?" I couldn't believe it. After all this time, he wanted to see me. I must have reread that message a dozen times before I finally responded. "Of course," I typed, my hand shaking. "Just let me know where and when." He texted back a few minutes later, saying we could meet at a coffee shop downtown around noon. I said yes, even though my heart was racing. I didn't know what to expect. Was he coming to forgive me? To give me another chance? Or was this just a final goodbye? I didn't know. And the thought of seeing him again after so long made me both excited and terrified. The days leading up to Friday felt like they dragged on forever. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. Max could tell something was off, but I didn't tell him about the meeting. I didn't want to get his hopes up or have him involved in this part of my life, at least not yet. This was between me and Daniel. I needed to handle it on my own. When Friday finally came, I got to the coffee shop about 15 minutes early. I sat there, fidgeting, watching the door every time it opened, half expecting him to bail at the last minute. But then, right at noon, Daniel walked in. I don't know what I expected. Maybe I thought he'd look different after all these years, but he didn't. He looked exactly the same, just older, taller maybe, more grown up. But he still had that same look in his eyes, serious, thoughtful, like he was always deep in his own head. He spotted me sitting in the booth and walked over. I stood up, my heart pounding, wanting to hug him, but I held back. I didn't know how he'd react, and I didn't want to push him. He just gave me a nod and said, "Hey." His voice was calm, almost too calm, like he was holding something back. "Hey," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's good to see you." He sat down across from me, and for a second we just stared at each other. I didn't know what to say. I had spent years thinking about this moment, about how I'd apologize, about how I'd try to explain everything, but now that he was here, I couldn't find the words. Finally, I broke the silence. "How have you been?" "I'm fine," he said, his tone flat. "Busy with work, life, you know." I nodded, feeling awkward. I wanted to ask him so many things, but I didn't want to overwhelm him, so I just sat there, waiting for him to say something. And then after what felt like an eternity, he looked at me and said, "I just want to understand how it happened." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "Max," he said, his voice sharp. "How did it start between you and him?" I wasn't expecting that question. I thought maybe we'd talk about the past in general, about how I hurt him, but I didn't think he'd go straight for the details. I hesitated, not sure how much to say. It just happened," I said, fumbling with my words. "I didn't plan it, Daniel. I never meant for things to go that way." He didn't seem satisfied with that answer. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "So all those times you were working late, or out with friends, you were really with him?" I felt a lump in my throat. "Yes," I admitted. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I know I should have been honest with you." His face didn't change, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. "And what about the times I asked to spend time with you? Did you lie to me so you could be with him instead?" I wanted to disappear. Hearing him say it out loud like that made everything feel so much worse. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears filling my eyes. He looked away, shaking his head. "You missed my birthday. You missed my soccer games, and it was all because of him." "I know," I said, my voice breaking. "I was wrong. I made a huge mistake." Daniel stayed quiet for a long time, and I just sat there, wiping away the tears that wouldn't stop falling. I wanted to reach out to him, to tell him how much I regretted everything, but I didn't know if it would matter. Finally, he looked back at me, his face calm but serious. "I didn't come here for an apology," he said. "I already knew all of this. I just needed to hear it from you." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "I don't have an issue with you dating someone, Mom," he continued. "I never did, but I can't get over the fact that you didn't even think about how it would affect me. You put your relationship with Max before our relationship, and that's something I can't forgive." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Daniel, please." He held up his hand, cutting me off. "I've made peace with it," he said. "I just wanted closure. But I don't want you in my life anymore. I've moved on, and I think you should too." His words hit me like a brick. I wanted to scream, to beg him to reconsider, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. He had made up his mind, and there was nothing I could say to change it. "I wish you the best," he said, standing up. "But this is goodbye." And with that, he walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me sitting there, feeling like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. I sat there for a long time, unable to move, unable to think. I had hoped this meeting would be the start of healing, of reconnecting with my son. But instead, it was the end. And I had no one to blame but myself.